Silversea Cruises recently launched the Silver Dawn, the 10th ship in its fleet. In fact, the ship is one of 24 new ships built during the pandemic. So how did cruise lines like Silversea use the pandemic to build in new design and health protocols on their ships? And how did that pandemic change the line's approach to ports, passengers, and the overall cruise experience? I spoke with the CEO of Silversea, Roberto Martinoli. I'll start with the obvious question. It's great to be sailing again?
Absolutely. It's really great to be back, and we have more and more ships coming back into service, and we'll be to full fleet capacity soon in terms of ships being back with passengers on board.
Let's go back to the original CDC no-sail order about 18 months ago. Everything comes to a screeching halt, and you were stuck with more than 70 compliance items you had to complete before they'd let you sail again. How did you get that done?
It didn't take too long because we're preparing. We're also having a panel of experts on our side that were in contact with the CDC. So before they came with the final recommendation, we knew already what we had to do. There were a few things that we needed to, do, like ventilation modification and things like that, hospital modification, making sure that there were isolation cabins available. Once the final recommendation was out, we were ready to go.
But that also required a significant capital investment.
Sure, but I mean, there are improvements, which are very, very welcome, and they will stay with the ships now.
It's one thing to say things were open, but as we all know, everybody had a different rule. Every country had different regulations. So how do you adapt to all that and still operate a cruise line?
This is very complicated, particularly for companies like us that are operating globally, and we have operation simultaneously in different parts of the world. Unfortunately, it has not been possible to coordinate all of those rules, regulation, protocols, and definitions. So it has been a huge amount of work for us to be able to try to coordinate that and also communicate it to our passengers, because the passengers were getting very confused because they were reading things from different sources. So it has been quite confusing, and it would be very welcome a little more coordination in those protocols and rules.
Let's take a good year, back to, let's say, 2019. How many ports of call did Silversea have?
About 900 different destinations, 900 ports on all 7 continents. So it's a fairly complicated, I would say, amount of information that you need to kind of manage. Fortunately, I think that we've been able to explain, communicate, and make people understand what we are doing. We've always been having a very high focus on health and safety and security, and we have a great organization on board. We have hospital, we have medical personnel, we have procedures, and we went through it already in the past because viruses is not only the one that we are facing today. We were the first industry that was taking great efforts and was dealing with the norovirus in a very, very professional way.
There's COVID, but there's also now the situation in Ukraine. You've had to pivot and take a lot of places off the schedule. Places like the Russian Far East or St. Petersburg, places even I wanted to go to. Those are off the table now, right?
Unfortunately, we had to reroute those itineraries. So for St. Petersburg, we are doing other cities in the Baltic there, around St. Petersburg, avoiding St. Petersburg, of course. Russian Far East is at the end of the season, so it's very unlikely that we will be able to do it. I would suspect that for some time this is not going to happen. And on the Black Sea, we had to reroute itineraries more, staying more into the Mediterranean side without entering the Black Sea, getting into Turkey, into Istanbul, but then not proceeding any further.
Let's talk about some headlines that weren't as prominent during COVID. It's one thing to repatriate passengers, to get them back. That was a big challenge considering where all your passengers were coming from, and needed to get back to. But then there was your crew. They couldn't go home right away. So how long did it take you to get everybody back?
The vast majority of the crew were able to be repatriated in maybe a couple of months since the beginning of that.
But think about that, a couple of months.
A couple of months, and that was, for the majority, but for some selected countries, we had people that stayed on board up to 6 months before they could go back, because there was no way that the country would allow anybody to come in and out, and therefore we kept them on board.
That had to be tough.
It was very tough and difficult also. Mentally, it's difficult to bear something like that. I mean, someone that cannot go back home is kind of counterintuitive these days. I mean, we're all used to give in a big globalization effort, and the fact that all of a sudden borders are closed and you cannot get back home is something that is heavy.
All right, but you got them home, but now you had to get them back. And now we had the issue of vaccinations. Not every country was ready for that. Not every country was open to that. How did you get them all back to the ships?
In some of those countries, vaccination were not available to start with. Today is different, of course, now, after almost 2 years. I mean, we are in a much better place with that, so vaccination are available. But then, I mean, not only is a problem of availability of vaccination, but what vaccine did you get? Because certain vaccines are not accepted in other parts of the world. So this is another big challenge that you have to go through. And then you need to decide whether or not you revaccinate these people. Is it safe? Is it medically correct to do it? So it has been quite challenging, but we wanted to make sure we're putting our crew in a safe condition, and we wanted them to be vaccinated.
And then there are the mask rules, which seem to be changing by the hour.
Yeah, the crew always need to wear a mask and keep social distancing. Passengers here, mask is not mandatory, it's strongly recommended. In certain venues, like when you go to the theater where you cannot apply social distancing or you're very close or too many people in one room, or during the boat drill. So there are certain conditions where we require the mask anyway.
So are the bookings coming back?
Bookings are coming back. They started coming back as of May last year. We've been seeing improvement, and then of course it goes with the spreading of the virus. So when the virus spreads more, booking go down, and when the virus spreads less, I mean, booking will go up. But all in all, I think that there is a lot of pent-up demand. People want to go back to travel and to cruising particularly.
Roberto Martinoli, the CEO of Silversea, here on the Silver Dawn. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter.